advanced Hindi video series. Periodically throughout the quarter, I'll be sharing videos like this with you to help you understand the materials better, and also to help you get the most out of them. This quarter, we are reading texts, listening to songs, and watching films that have to do with three broad themes. First, Hindi kya hai? What is Hindi? Second, philology kya hai? What is philology? And third, love kya hai? What is love? Hopefully, as we explore these questions, we'll also learn a little bit about what ties these three themes together. Today, we'll be reading the 18th century poet Bhikharidas, both to get a sense of what we mean when we use the term Hindi, and also to get a sense of what we mean when we use the term literature, in this case, Kavya. Before beginning, I want to remind you that if you want to learn more about the phonological, morphological, grammatical, or prosodic elements of the text we'll be reading today, you can look at the following sources, several of which are available for free online, and all of which are available on the course website. Bhikharidas was a Srivastav Kayastha who wrote roughly between 1728 and 1750 of the Common Era. He went by the name Das, which was his bhanata, or chop, or his pen name, or MC name, much like the way Curtis James Jackson III has the MC name 50 Cent. Bhikharidas was from the village of Tyonga in the kingdom of Pratapgarh, and he wrote the Kavya Nirnaya, which we will be reading, for Hindupati Singh, who was the brother of the king of Pratapgarh, Raja Prithvi Singh. He also composed several other works, none of which have received much recent attention from scholars, PhD students, hint hint. Bhikharidas composed the Kavya Nirnaya in 1746. Now, what is the Kavya Nirnaya? The title means the determination of poetry, in other words, the setting out of what poetry is and how it should be. He composed the Kavya Nirnaya in the tradition of the Riti Granth. A Riti Granth was a poetic manual, both for would-be poets and for connoisseurs of poetry. A Riti Granth consisted primarily of lakshana, that is, definitions of poetic figures, and udarana, which were examples of those figures, usually composed by the poet or sometimes taken from the poetry of others. So let's get started. We're working with the edition of the Bhikharidas Granthavali, published by the Nagari Pracharni Sabha in 2014 Samvat, and edited by Vishwanath Prasad Mishra. Let's start on page 4. First, I want to draw your attention to the subject headings in the text. Sometimes these are added by scribes in manuscripts. Oftentimes they're added by modern editors in printed editions. And the first time you encounter a text, it's often helpful to look at these subject headings because they give you a sense of the material that follows. In this case, on page 4, we see the subject heading Kavya Prayojan, the purpose or motivation for poetry. And Bhikharidas starts off this section by mentioning the names of famous Hindi poets and giving the various reasons why they composed poetry. When we get to verse 13, which is where our reading assignment begins, you'll notice that Bhikharidas has started speaking about something else. He's now speaking about poetry itself. And we have the note here, sorta, in brackets, which tells us what verse form this is. This is a sorta. It's the inverse of the ubiquitous doha verse form of Hindi. And a sorta begins with 11 matras, and we can count them out. Rasa, ka, bit, go, anga. That should be and is 11 matras in value. Then bhushana hai, bhushana sakala, which also, if we count that, that will come out to 13. Now, so that's the verse form. Let's look at the content of the verse. Bhikharidas starts by saying, Rasa kabit ko anga. And our editor has conveniently put this comma here to tell us that's where the yati, where the cesura is. And oftentimes, when poets wrote in the form of a doha or a sorta, and you had this cesura in the middle, again, noted here by the comma, that was where there was a syntactic break, where one statement often ended and another statement began. So that tells us we can start with just this first half of the line. Ras kabit ko anga. Okay, so rasa, you should know, is literally flavor, but is the aesthetic sentiment, the poetic aesthetic sentiment that a poem creates. Feelings of shringar, erotic love, feelings of vira, heroism, feelings of karuna, pity, feelings of bhaya, fear, etc. It's what it creates as an experience for the listener or the reader. Kabita, note this ba. You recall from Snell that in early modern Hindi, or Braj Bhasha, vas often changed to buzz, and that is the case here. Kabita here is the same as kavita. And kavita, with the double dental ta at the end, is a verse form itself, and we'll talk about that later in the course. But here, this simply means kavita, poetry. So rasa kavit ko anga. You'll find anga in the dictionary. Ang is limb of the body. It's also part of a larger whole. And the question is what to do with this ko. This ko is not the ko of modern standard Hindi. This is the ko, and again you'll note this in Snell, being used as a possessive postposition. Ka, or more likely in this case, ge. So ras kabit ko ang, we could say in modern standard Hindi as ras kavita ke ang. And we could supply the copulative verb he, or the substantive verb he. So rasa, what is it? It's kavita ke ang. It's the limbs of poetry. Rasa, the aesthetic sentiment, is the limbs of poetry. Now let's look at the next half of the verse. Bhushan hai, bhushan sakala. Okay, so bhushan, ornamentation, is or are bhushana sakala. Sakala, all, entire. Bhushana, again, ornamentation. And in classical Hindi poetry, having the same word twice with the same meaning was considered a dosha, a flaw, a mistake. And so if we think Bhikharidas was a good poet, we should assume that these two bhushanas mean different things, and in fact, they do. The first is bhushana, ornament in the sense of poetic ornament. And the second bhushana is ornament in the sense of the ornaments or the jewelry of a woman. Already, we've seen in this verse that Bhikharidas is comparing poetry to a woman, and he's saying that the rasa is, if poetry is a woman, then rasa is her limbs. Bhushana hai bhushana sakala. The bhushan, the poetic ornaments, which means figures of speech, metaphor, simile, etc., are the various ornaments, the sakala bhushana, all the ornaments that she wears. Let's move to the second line, guna. Now you'll notice here guna ends with a dental na. But we should remember from Snell that oftentimes the retroflex na in early Hindi becomes the dental na. So this is not gun with, or this is gun with a dental na, but it's the same as gun with a retroflex na, which would be a virtue, a merit. Then we see sarupa. What is this sarupa? Now let's recall again from Snell that oftentimes when we have conjunct consonants, and I'll give you an example here, swa, sa and va together. When we have conjunct consonants like that in Middle Indo-Aryan languages, Then, when it comes to the new Indo-Aryan languages of the early modern period, like Braj Bhasha, these get split up. The conjuncts dissolve either into their independent parts, or sometimes one of their members just dropped out completely. So sarupa here is a form of swarupa, form, embodiment. Finally, let's look at all. All, again, our editor has conveniently given us some punctuation with which to guess the meaning. He's put an apostrophe there, as if something has been lost. And sure enough, it has. It's the ra of or. So it's just the word and. Then we have rang. Rang, as you know, is color. So guna, sarupa, o ranga. The poetic merits, its form, and its color. And color here is used in a metaphorical sense. Oftentimes it is associated with rasa insofar as that it's the emotional color of a poetic work that's being gestured toward. Then we have in our last quarter, Dushan Kare Kurupata. Now, Dushana, you might have found in the dictionary, is a synonym for dosha. And dosha is a flaw or a sin. In this case, it's a poetic flaw. Using poetic meter incorrectly, using a figure of speech incorrectly, using particular sounds, phonemes that don't sound good together. These are all poetic flaws that are supposed to be avoided. And so we have dushan, poetic flaws, karae. Now, karae, you'll recognize the verb stem. It's kar, from to do, to make. And that a ending is the ending of third person singular in the subjunctive present, or present subjunctive as Snell calls it. Remember that this particular form, the present subjunctive, can be used both for what we would typically use the simple present for in modern Hindi, or for a true subjunctive, something that would happen, might happen, should happen. In this case, it's being used more in the simple present sense of simply to do or does. And finally, we see kurupata, ku plus rupata. How do we break this apart? Well, let's start with the middle part, rup form, right? When you add the ku prefix to anything, it immediately makes it bad, gives the sense, a negative sense to it. So kurup, so a bad form would be ugly, kurup, or ugliness, a bad form, and ta. The ta suffix is often added to make abstract nouns, either from concrete nouns or oftentimes from adjectives. And so ku rupata would give us ugliness. Now to go back, and I need to correct myself here, this kare could be actually plural as well as singular. Treat it singular here as dushan kare kurupata. A poetic flaw makes kare for ugliness, kurupata. So in other words, if poetry is a woman, then the rasa is her limbs, the poetic figures, the bhushana, are her ornaments. There are guna, she has virtues, sarupa, form, and rang, color, dushan kare kurupata, which poetic flaws would make ugly. So again, taken all together, this verse is a metaphor for poetry, telling us what its important parts are, what its important elements are, through the metaphor of a beautiful woman. And this was not an invention of Bhikharidas. There was a long tradition of comparing poetry to a woman, not only in Hindi, but in Sanskrit and the many other languages of South Asia. Okay, so this brings us to the next verse, verse 14, and a new subject. You'll note that the subject heading says, Bhasha Lakshana. And you'll recall from earlier that Lakshana is a definition. In this case, we have the Bhasha Lakshana, the definition of Bhasha, of the poetic language that Bhikharidas is using. And you'll also note that in brackets we have the word Doha, which is another verse form, the inverse of the Sortha, meaning that the beginning, the first half of a poetic line has 13 matras, and the second half of that line has 11 matras. And we won't count those out right now. Instead, we'll look at the meaning first. Bhasha, Brij Bhasha, Ruchira. So again, our editor has conveniently placed a comma there to let us know where the sasura, or the pause, is in between the two parts of the poetic line of the doha. So let's take that as one piece, one utterance. Bhasha, Brij Bhasha, Ruchira. Bhasha means the language, the spoken language in this case, or the particular poetic language which, or a group of poetic languages which Bhikharidas wants to tell us about. We'll talk more about that in class. Brij Bhasha is the same as Braj Bhasha, the language Bhasha of Braj, the region around Mathura in modern-day Uttar Pradesh. And Ruchir, like Ruchi in interest, Ruchira is an adjective meaning something that's interesting, beguiling, attractive. Okay, so Bhasha, Brij Bhasha, Ruchira. So we could maybe say that the language of Braj Bhasha is interesting, attractive, beguiling. Kahen sumati sabakoi. Kahen, you'll recognize the root of that verb, kaha, to say. Kahen, the nasalization there, kahen, increases the likelihood that this is a plural conjugation in the present subjunctive. And again, the present subjunctive can be used for what we would typically use the simple present for today. Kahen, they say. Sumati, mati, let's break that down. We have mati, a noun meaning mind. Sumati, su, good. So a good mind or the good-minded. All right, the wise, in other words. Saba koi, everyone. Saba koi. And even though this is a short e at the end of koi, instead of what it would normally be in modern standard Hindi, a long e, that's okay. In fact, the reason that it's a short e rather than a long e is to conform to the meter. At the end of a doha, there has to be a short syllable, and so it has to be short e. Again, we'll talk about that more later. So don't worry about that. That is koi, just like the modern Hindi for any or one. So kahe sumati sabakoi, so say the wise everyone. In other words, so say all of those who are wise. So the language of Braj Bhasha is attractive, is beautiful. So say all of the wise. Now let's go to the second line. And here it starts with Mele Sansakarita Parasyao. Mele, you'll recognize that root, that is milna, to join, to meet, to mix, or even to be like, to be similar. Sansakarita is, of course, Sanskrit, and you'll note again that the consonant conjunct of sa and ka have been dissolved into the constituent parts sa and ka. So Sanskarita. Paras yao. Paras, if you have trouble finding that in a dictionary, start looking at the beginning of the word rather than worrying about the endings, the final, as we'll call it. And you'll find that if you look for Paras, you'll find Iran and also the language of that region, Persian or Parsi. Okay, so we have Malay, Sanskrita, Parasyao. So we have either meeting or joining or being like Sanskrit and Persian. We'll leave that for the moment and go to the second half of the line. Pe, pe is like pe in modern standard Hindi or par. But, however, ati, ati, just as in modern Hindi, means more or greatly. Pragata, pragata is a tadbhava form of prakrta. Okay, manifest, visible, clear. Ju, ju is the same as the modern standard jo. And jo can mean one of two things. It either means that one, this thing, that thing, the correlative, as in modern standard Hindi, or it can sometimes mean if. Now let's finish looking at this line to figure out which. Pe ati prakata ju hoy. Hoy is again a subjunctive. The present subjunctive, which could be is or should be or shall be or could be. So let's put this all together. Malay Sanskrita Parasyao Pe Ati Pragata Ju Hoy. Well, the subject has not changed from the first line. We are still, or Bhikharidas is still describing Bhasha, bridge Bhasha. And so he says Malay Sanskrita Parasyao, which could mean it mixes with, or when it mixes with, Sanskrit and Persian, or it could mean it is like Sanskrit and Persian, pe, but ati pragata ju hoy. But it is that one, ju, jo, which is hoy, ati pragata, more manifest or more clear. It is that which is more easily expressed, that which is clearer than both. So Malay Sanskrit, so what do we have? We have the language of Braj Bhasha is attractive, is beautiful. So say all of the wise. It is like, or it is mixed perhaps, with Sanskrit and Persian, but it is that which is clearer, more easily expressed. Now, let's look at the final verse of this section, of this reading. Bridja Magadhi Mele Amara. Okay? Bridge, this is a shortened form of Bridge Bhasha, so Braj Bhasha. Magadhi, Magadhi is it's actually medieval language. It's a Middle Indo, or excuse me, it's a Prakrit. However, here this word is being used to denote Eastern forms of Hindi. Malay, again, mixed with or like. Amara. Amara here is a bit hard to figure out. Amara, you know, is undying. However, here, this is most likely a synonym for Sanskrit, and you'll see why in a moment. Nag. Naga, as you probably know, is a snake. However, again, we're probably not talking about snakes here, so this must mean something else. In fact, it means the language of the snakes, and the language of the snakes was Prakrit, or so it was thought in this time. And look back at your Mirza Khan, Tufat-ul-Hind, and you'll see a reference to Prakrit in there as the language of the snakes. Jamana. Jamana is again a tadbhava form of another word. Ja, we know, is often a form, or is often a phonetic change from ya. Ma, in this case, is a change from va. And na is just na yavana. And those of you familiar with Sanskrit or older forms of Hindi will recognize that as the Yavanas, people, meaning at this place in time, this word happens to mean those coming from the Islamic lands. So Yamana here means actually the language of those people, Arabic. And what about Bashani or Bakhani, depending on how we want want to pronounce this glyph here. Bhasha we recognize as language, and the ni at the end is an oblique plural ending. It tells us that this word is plural and that it's connected to the other words through some kind of construction like se, gelie, go. In other words, to the languages, with the languages, for the languages, etc. So when we look at that line all together, Brij, Braj Bhasha, Magadhi, Eastern Hindi, Malay, mixed with Amara, Sanskrit, Naga, Prakrit, Jamana, the language of the Yavanas, Arabic, Bakhani or Bashani, to those languages or with those languages. So we can construe this mixing with that. So we have Braj Bhasha mixed with the languages of Arabic, Prakrit, Sanskrit, and Eastern Hindi. Now in the final line, it starts out with Sahaj. Sahaj is a word, a term that can mean naturally or easily or simply. It can be an adjective or an adverb, followed by Parasihu. You'll recall that Paras is Iran, and Parasi or Parsion. Parasyon is Persian, the language of that region, and the hu here is an oblique marker again, meaning that there is, this term is being put in some kind of relationship with something else. Here it's probably a ko, or would be in modern standard Hindi. Sahaj, Parsi, ko, Malay. So mixed with Persian, either mixed with simple, natural Persian, or mixed in a natural, easy way with Persian. This Sahaj here could be taken in either way. Finally, in the last quarter of the Doha, we have this term Shat Bidhi. Shat, you'll recall from Sanskrit, is 6. Bidhi, again, this ba is a phonological change from va. So if it is vidhi, then vidhi means type, kind. And so we have Shat Vidhi, the 6 types. Kavit, again, that ba instead of va. This would be Kavit as in Kavita, poetry. And Bakhani. Now, Bakhani is kind of an ossified form from Bakhan, which is used as a verb to mean to state, to tell, to relate. And so Bakhani here can be taken as is said to be, or told to be, are here stated as. And so what you have is Bakhani, it is stated to be the Shatvidhi, the 6 types of kavita, of poetry, or the 6 types of, in this case, poetic language, which includes Braj mixed with Persian in a natural manner, or with easy Persian, clear. So let's take both lines together. Brij, which is Braj Bhasha, mixed with the languages of Eastern Hindi, Sanskrit, Prakrit, Arabic, and naturally with Persian, again mixed. These are said to be the 6 types of poetry, or the 6 types of poetic language. And so this should probably recall to you the pronouncements of Mirza Khan in the Tufat ul Hind, in which he also speaks of multiple languages of poetry in his time, and in which he also has a certain sense of how these relate to each other in an ecology of language. So what I would like you to do for our next class is to compare and contrast the statements of Bhikharidas and Mirza Khan on language and on poetic language.